Tonight is a sensitive lecture, so I pray that you will bear with me. Last night we spoke about two beasts becoming friends. And we looked at the biblical perspective that the second beast, which we identified as, can you remember? The United States of America, would implement the symbol of authority, the mark of the beast, of the first beast, which that beast claimed was Sunday. The worship on Sunday as a mark of their authority, as opposed to God who said the Sabbath day. And some would say, but it's unlikely that the United States would introduce legislating on religious matters because the Constitution doesn't permit that. So some people might just shrug it off. But the Bible says that there will be an image to the beast. In other words, a church-state combination like the first one, dictating to the state what the moral dictates should be. And tonight we're going to look at this from the perspective of the two beasts. Again, what I'm doing here is combination lectures. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The full story is on the DVDs, but it's enough. We'll sum it up. Let's have a look at the story from their perspective. The United States says Revelation chapter 13 will create an image to the beast. So what the first one was, the second one will reflect. It will become like it. The first one spoke like a dragon eventually. Although having lamb-like principles, the second one will speak like a dragon and enforce the dictates of the first one. So we looked at the architectural similarities, which are just a reflection, an image, one of the other. Here we can see the Statue of Liberty, and this is, of course, what makes the United States palatable and visible throughout the entire world. What do we see? How was it laid? There is the cornerstone. What's that symbol on there? It's a Masonic structure. So it says something. It's Mithraism. Ultimately, Mithraism will survive. She's holding a flame in her hand. It is the flame of liberty. Who holds that flame in paganism? You can follow it through all the way to Luciferianism. In fact, the torch is also a fasciae. So there's a message in that which is scary. Isn't it interesting that the Eiffel Tower, which is a phallic symbol, was also constructed by masonry, and there's a replica there of the Statue of Liberty right next to it. It's like saying Isis and Osiris. Isn't that interesting? We're going back to the old pagan worship of we are gods, we are not subject to anyone, and we have the wisdom. Remember that out of the French Revolution came the human rights. Did you know that one of the human rights is the right to a day of rest? And that even in Muslim countries, the day of rest is which day? Not Friday. Friday is a day of lunchtime worship practice. It's a normal work day. Sunday is the day of rest, even in Muslim countries. In fact, the international rest day for banking is which day? Sunday. So Sunday is ensconced in human rights. The Pope says, I'm a defender of human rights, and he likes that, and he makes sure that Sunday is in there. Now, the United States would breach its constitution and have diplomatic relations with the Vatican, and eventually, says the Bible, enforce its dictates. And Ronald Reagan is the one who started it, you will remember. And here is the picture of that meeting between the two. They also had secret meetings up in Alaska before that and discussed many, many issues. And the Protestant leader of the world, if you like, and the United States in particular, the same thing. So you have church and state discussing issues with the first beast. And you'll remember that I showed you that it was Billy Graham who influenced Ronald Reagan, the first American president, to appoint a full ambassador to the Vatican. So in other words, bringing this church-state issue to a head. You remember from that quote that some of his Baptist friends were upset. But of course there was an agenda here. They have to head this way. They are fulfilling biblical prophecy. And so church and state union has become more and more prominent in the United States since those days. And every president has made a point of showing this connection with the Vatican and with the Protestant world. The image of the beast, Protestant America, together with the state, is a replica of Catholic church activity together with the European states of the old days. So the same happened with Bill Clinton and the papacy. He also went to great lengths to make sure that the symbol of church and state became prominent in this country. Here he is, together with Billy Graham, at his final address, public address, as it were, and the symbol of church and state becoming more and more prominent. And then, of course, the president gave the Medal of Freedom to Pope John Paul. I'm just recapping a little bit as we go along. So the image is starting to arise. Now, this is something that would have been quite strange in the past. Here you have George Bush with the Knights of Columbus. Now, the Knights of Columbus are, of course, a Catholic political order with a view of getting Catholic politics ensconced in this country. And how does the President of the United States stand towards this strictly Roman Catholic establishment? Well, on August 4, 2004, President Bush spoke to the Knights of Columbus, and it's a long speech. I'm just going to rush through some of it, but notice what he says, what his attitude is. I appreciate Carl Anderson and his leadership. I've gotten to know Carl because, you see, he's more than just an introducer of presidents. Laughter. He's a person who works with president, at least this president. And I'm proud to have his help. It's good to see my family friend, and then he goes through a lot of people here, and he's proud to be here. He's a neighbor in my temporary residence. Laughter. I appreciate Cardinal Egan. Who was he? The leader of the Knights of Malta. So here he's having an address to this highly Catholic establishment. I appreciate, and then he goes through the list of the cardinals. Cardinal Regali, Cardinal of Chicago, Cardinal Keeler of Baltimore. Thank you for your presence. I'm honored to be in the presence of Cardinal Maszewski, the Archbishop of Krakow, who took the place of the previous Pope. I appreciate you coming, sir. I appreciate, and he goes through all the bishops and all of these, and he makes a long speech. Thanks for having me. 2 months ago, I had the privilege of visiting the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, at the Vatican. It was my third meeting with the Holy Father since I took office. And for those of you who have ever met him, you know I'm telling you the truth when I tell you being in his presence is an awesome experience. This is interesting stuff. He is a true presence. On the occasion, I had the special honor of presenting him with America's highest civil award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It was my chance to express our nation's respect for a devoted servant of God and a true hero of our time. Protestant America propagating which power? The first beast. Pope John Paul II has been a unique and commanding voice for the cause of the poor, the weak, the hungry, and the outcast. He has challenged our nation and the entire world to embrace the culture of life. He's called upon us to uphold and affirm the dignity of every person, rich and poor, able and disabled, born and unborn. He's called us to love and serve our neighbors in need. Few organizations have worked harder and done more to meet this challenge than the Knights of Columbus. I know you're proud of your organization, and you should be. That's a fascinating speech. Fascinating. Well, how did the world react to all of these events happening in the United States? This is an interesting article in a newspaper, quoted in my country, and the headlines immediately struck me as a fulfillment of prophecy. Church and state merge under Bush. Wow. You know, I've been preaching this message for almost 20 years. And I used to say it will happen, and people said, you're nuts. Fortunately, I don't have to say that anymore. I say, read the headlines for details. Now, preacher, priest, politicians have combined on the grounds that John F. Kennedy disputed in his famous speech. And then it gives an article of how the state and the churches are working together, how the image of the beast is coming together. And I was stunned at the accuracy with which these people in my country actually saw this issue. Let me read you some of the precepts of this most famous speech, I would almost say by any American president. The president here is Kennedy. Let's have a look what Kennedy said. He said, quote, I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, and where no church school is granted any public funds or political preference, where no public official either requests or accepts instruction on public policy from the Pope or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will directly or indirectly upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials. Wow, what a speech. I think it cost him his life. Personal opinion. Well, let's analyze that. Total separation of church and state, is that correct? No funding on a church basis, none of these things. Nobody may prescribe to the state, be he Catholic, be he Protestant, what he must do. That is where America was not very long ago. Is that right? Where is it today? Bush urges groups to bid for funding for faith-based initiatives. Catholic News Service, Washington. President George W. Bush urged faith-based charities to bid competitively for federal funding. Is he turning on its head what Kennedy said, yes or no? Are you noticing something here? In a luncheon speech at the day-long National Conference on Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, Bush said progress has been made, but much more needs to be done to give faith-based social service programs equal footing with a secular non-profit in federal, state, and corporate grant-making. Quote, it used to be that groups were prohibited from receiving any federal funding whatsoever because they had a cross or a star or a crescent on the wall, Bush said, and that's changed for the better. I have news for you. I think it's changed for the worse. He called faith-based service organizations America's armies of compassion. Church and state beginning to merge. The Bible said it would happen. During his speech, Bush announced that he had just signed an executive order creating a Center for Faith-Based and Community Initiatives in the Department of Homeland Security. The center is to coordinate the department's efforts to remove regulatory contractings and other obstacles to the participation of faith-based communities. So what Bush is doing, he's turning everything upside down. It's interesting that the one went down to Dallas and was shot, and the other one went up from Dallas to Washington and reversed everything that had been done. There's interesting symbolism. We haven't got time to go into it. But that is the state of things today. Well, how far do we go? This is March 13, 2006. This is bishops, politicians, Catholic news servants. Conscience must concur with the church's moral teaching, politicians told. Didn't Bush say that no prelate may tell a politician what to do? No pope, no priest, no nothing? Kennedy at least, didn't he say that? Yes, of course he said that. And here, now they're dictating. Washington, Responding to a recent statement by Catholic Democrats in the House of Representatives affirming the primacy of conscience in their voting decisions, 3 key leaders of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops said conscience must be consistent with the fundamental moral principles, including the Church's opposition to abortion. As members of the Church, all Catholics are obliged to shape our consciences in accord with the moral teachings of the Church, said the statement on responsibilities of Catholics in public life, which called abortion a grave violation of the most fundamental human right, the right to life, etc., etc., etc. They use some key issues, but of course they want the entire moral statute of Rome to be enforced. The Vatican ambassador to the United States here, I believe that the United States as the world's only superpower and the Holy See as the only worldwide moral political sovereignty have significant roles to play. Their actions will impact the lives of people in all parts of the globe. What the Bible said is coming to fruition. And I've given you this quote before, but I'll give it again. The best way to honor Pope John Paul II, said George Bush, truly one of the great men, is to take his teaching seriously, is to listen to his words and to put his words and teachings into action here in America. This is a challenge we must accept. Isn't this introducing papal precepts in government? This is what he's doing. So he is a fulfillment of prophecy. This is amazing. We are living in the most thunderous time in human history. In 1995, Keith Tournier already said, the wall of separation between church and state that was erected by secular humanists and other enemies of religious freedom, how can you twist history? Has to come down. Those opposing our views are the new fascists. That's fascinating. Fascists calling non-fascists fascists. That's Jesuit dialectic thinking. That's the way they do it. They're very good at it. So they turn everything upside down. Remember this man? He was chairman of the Republican National Committee 1997 to 2000, but he got a more important job. He is the ambassador to the Holy See. Here he is with his credentials. Holy See has full diplomatic relations with 172 nations of 228. That's 76%. Let's have a look at a gathering with the Pope and the Knights of Malta, the previous Pope. Rome, the Vatican, the Holy Father, John Paul II, with the Order's ambassador, Mr. Stephen Falaise, on the right. Prince Paolo Francesco, etc., all the high knights. Rome, the Vatican Supreme Pontiff, John Paul II, with the ambassador from the Order of the Holy See, Mr. Stephen Falaise. Here, I urge the entire order, continued the Pope, to continue to support with generosity the ideological battles which underpin the civilization of the third millennium. Remember that the Knights of Malta are the ones that control many of the issues of banking and military objectives in this country and others around the world. And all those initiatives which the Church is undertaking to protect the rights of everyone, starting with the weakest. John Paul finally expressed his grateful appreciation for what the Order has already done and the most fervent good wishes for what it is planning to do to assist pilgrims during the Jubilee, etc., etc., etc. Get working, he says. These are the secret societies. Get working. And the Knights Templars, these orders coming to power and bringing about that which the Bible said they would do. They think they're so great. God already knows what they're doing. And here then, when Ransi and them came together, they were wearing such interesting paraphernalia. Now, let's have a look at some interesting points here. The Templars. Remember we spoke about them? The Templars instituted occult, Hermetic, or Scottish Rite Freemasons. I'm quoting now from the book Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, the Bible of Freemasonry. It says here, mentions Pence himself, had not that keen and far-sighted intellect, nor that grandeur of purpose which afterwards distinguished the military founder of another soldiery that became formidable to kings. This is interesting language that Pike, he writes. This is a channeled book. No person can write like this. The Templars were unintelligent and therefore unsuccessful Jesuits. Isn't that fascinating? So Freemasonry says that the Templars got caught in the act. Jesuits are too clever to get caught in the act. Wow. The end of the drama is well known, and how Jacques de Molay and his fellows perished in the flames. De Molay is the youth order of Freemasonry, of which Clinton, of course, was a member. But before his execution, the chief of the doomed order organized and instituted what afterwards came to be called the occult, Hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. You know, they deny their Templar origin, and here he states it quite blatantly, if you want to read it. And I didn't write it, I photocopied it out of the book so that nobody would say I'm messing with the words. That's why it's a photocopy. In the book Isis Unveiled, this is what Blavatsky says about the papacy. No Apostle Peter was ever at Rome, but the Pope, seizing the scepter of the Pontifex Maximus, the keys of Janus and Cybele, and adorning his Christian head with the cap of the Magna Mater, copied from that of the tiara of the Brahma Mater, the supreme pontiff of the initiates of old India, became the successor of the pagan high priest, the real Peter Romano or Petroma. So she says it quite blatantly. He's the high priest of paganism. Their own writings. Isn't this fascinating? Then she writes further, is not the worship of saints and angels now, said Bishop Newton years ago, in all respects the same, that the worship of demons was in former times? Wow. The name only is different. The thing is identically the same, the very same temples, the very same images. Did you know that all the Roman Catholic major temples stand on pagan sites of worship, which were once consecrated to Jupiter and other demons are now consecrated to the Virgin Mary and other saints? The whole of paganism is converted and applied to popery. Why not be impartial and add that a good portion of what was adopted by Protestant religions also? These people know. The very apostolic designation Peter is from the mysteries. The Hierophant, or the Supreme Pontiff, bore the Chaldean title Peter, or interpreter.